Welcome to this session. The session focuses on providing information about sampling procedure. In social science studies, sometimes it is not advisable or it becomes impossible for you to assess all the elements in the target population for the study. And therefore, you have to select some representative samples from the target population to support your study. If you want to test that there is salt in the sea, I don't think you go and take all the water in the sea and test before you know that there is salt in it. What you do is that you take maybe a cup and then you test it, and then at the end of the day, you generalize the findings about it. That is more of a natural science. But in the case of social science, it becomes very difficult. Or like the case of social science too, we also apply the same principle. So, for instance, if a study is to look out for the influence of social media advertising on the marketing performance of SMEs in Ghana, then the question is, are we supposed to select all SMEs in Ghana and then uh, study them before we know how the use of social media advertising influences their marketing performance? We cannot, or it is not even possible to do that. Therefore, we have to select a representative sample size from the population for such a study. So that is the logic behind the issue of population and sample. In studying population, we have parameters in the population. And when it comes to the sample, we use statistics to determine whether the parameters uh, that characterizes the population are also found in the sample of interest in our study. Now, we have two main type of issues to consider when we are targeting a population for study. We have to look out for one, the population and the target population. Under certain circumstances, the population could be the same as the target population, but under certain circumstances too, the target population may vary from the population. So let's look at such a case. If the study wants to look at the influence of social media advertising on the performance of SMEs in Ghana, then if you look at SMEs in general, that becomes the total population. But if you look at SMEs that are using social media advertising, that becomes the target population. Therefore, the target population will automatically, in this situation, be lesser than the total element in the population because not all SMEs are using the social media advertising tools. In statistical terms, the source document that provides the information about the elements in the population is what we call the sampling frame. Therefore, before you do sample, it is important that you determine the sampling frame so that it will guide your effort as a researcher when it comes to selecting the sample size. Now, when we want to get a sampling frame, there are two issues that we have to look out for. One, we can have an official source document that can tell us the number of elements in the population. For instance, if you are studying students in the University of Cape Coast about how the COVID-19 is influencing their degree of satisfaction on campus or stress level, for instance, then you can get the list of the registered students in the University of Cape Coast, and that one becomes the source document that we classified as the sampling frame. But in a situation whereby you don't have any credible source document to help you to obtain the total element in the population, what do? You can as well create your own uh, sampling frame by conducting feasibility study to know the elements in the population that will be accessible for the study that you are undertaking. So that is what we have to take note. It is not always 100% certain that you always get registered list of elements for your studies. If there is no such thing there, you can create your own sampling frame and to support the conduct of your study. Now let's look at the sample. Sample talks about the elements in the population that have been selected for the study. And therefore, if we select the SMEs that are using the social media advertising to study, then that one becomes the sample. So this is what we have to know about population and sample. Now, for you to say that your sampling is a good sample for study, there are some few things that we have to look out for, and we have to take note of them. The first one is the representativeness of the sample. When we say that your sample size is representative, it bears at least two main characteristics. First, the sample must be selected from the target population or the population of interest in the study. So if the study is about looking at how smoking affects the health of people, then it means that those that you use for the study must be those that engage in smoking. If you go and use alcoholic people who drink alcoholic kind of thing, rather than taking those who smoke, or if you go and use non-smokers, we cannot say that the result that we have found is representative of the situation. The second aspect is that the sample size should be adequate. There are about 32 million Ghanaians, and if you want to study the perception about the economic conditions and the living standard in Ghana, and you go and select about 50 people, then you interview them and get their opinion. The question is, can we, based on the voice of these 50 Ghanaians, to generalize that the living condition in Ghana is okay or not okay? It also means that you have to use appropriate sampling procedure that will help you in selecting those people so that we can see whether their voice is adequate enough to generalize their findings or not. So when it comes to the second component, we have to look at it in terms of number, the means by which we select the elements or we select the sample for our studies. The next thing we have to look out for is the sample size. Your sample size should be adequate before you can generalize the findings from the perspective of the sample to cover the opinions of the total population. If most of the if the voices of the those that were surveyed, about the 50 Ghanaians, they are saying that oh, life is good. And remember, maybe you go and survey those who are well-to-do people, rich people, big businessmen, and then you see that we could be more biased. Okay, so the sample size should be fair enough. You should include more people. That can help us to say that if we have say 32 million people and we have surveyed about 3 million or 4 million of them, and this is what we are getting because they were randomly selected, then at least we can believe their opinion more than the situation whereby we select the privileged few to represent our findings. So the sample size is key, and though we have to use scientific means under certain circumstances to determine what constitutes appropriate sample size. The next thing that we have to consider is the degree of the variability in the population, and that one talks about the distribution of the attribute in the population, or the degree of the distribution of the attribute in the population. In that instance, the more heterogeneous population is, the larger the sample size that you have to obtain to be able to do your research. And also, if the variability is lesser, or if it is more homogeneous in nature, then it is important that you select a smaller sample size for your study. So we can express it in mathematically, and we can have it as sometimes they peg it at 50%, which constitute about 0.5. So you see that when we are determining a sample size, the issue of variability will come in, and then we will use that one to help us in determining the appropriate sample size. The next one is the desired precision of the estimate. And the desired precision of the estimate uh, talks about the sampling error. So how much error can we tolerate in our study? And from scientific point of view, we have several uh, percentage elements that we can use. Normally they are expressed in percentage. We have 5% sampling error. We can also estimate our sampling error to be maybe 1% or even 10%. And in most instances for social science, the desired precision is estimated as 5%, which constitutes 0.05. And therefore, the level of precision simply means the range in which the true value of the population is estimated to be. So if you want to look at the appropriate sample size, then it is important that we are able to check the desired precision of the estimate. And then the next element is the confidence interval. Um, and the confidence interval is based on what we call the central limit theorem, which states that when the population is repeatedly sampled, the average values of the attribute obtained by those samples is equal to the true population value. And for a normal distribution of a data about the item or variable that is being studied in the population, normally we estimate the confidence interval at 95%. So if you estimate your confidence interval at 95%, then it means that your degree of significance level will be also estimated as 5%. If you estimate your confidence interval to be 97, then it means that level of significance is expected to be 3%. So these are the key attributes that we have to consider when we want to determine sample size. And once we are able to achieve these things and we are clear on them, then the sample size that we use can be deemed as good sample size for our social science research. Thank you.